I heard the crash before I saw it. The garage door slammed open with a metallic scream, lights flickering, echoing through the house. My heart skipped a beat. Something wasn't right. I ran toward the sound, my bare feet slapping against the hardwood floor. The house felt wrong. Quiet but heavy, like it was holding its breath. My husband's boots echoed from upstairs, deliberate, steady. The sound should have been comforting. I've walked behind him in barracks, in airports, during his deployments. Those boots meant strength, protection, home. Tonight, they meant danger. I reached the top of the stairs. I froze. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. You have no idea what he's hiding. My fingers trembled as I stared at it. I didn't know whether to delete it, call it a prank, or follow the warning. My mind raced. Who would send this? And why now? Down the hall, the study door was slightly open. I slid closer, silent as a shadow. Papers scattered across the floor, some torn, some soaked with coffee. Bills I'd never seen, letters addressed to names I didn't recognize, photographs tucked into the edges of books. My pulse hammered in my ears. I wanted to turn around and run, but my legs refused. Something inside me, anger, fear, maybe survival, pushed me forward. Then I saw it. A photo, half hidden under a pile of unopened mail. Him, smiling with another woman. A woman I didn't know. She wasn't someone from his past, not a war buddy, not a colleague. She was everything he had kept from me. And in that second, the world tilted. Every laugh, every promise, every night I thought we were alone, I realized it was a lie. I sank to the floor, gripping the edge of the desk for balance. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely pick up the papers around me. The photo burned itself into my mind, but I forced myself to keep looking. There had to be more. There always is. Lies come in layers. I rifled through the drawers. Hidden envelopes, tiny keys, codes written on scraps of paper. A flash drive, taped beneath a stack of old files. I took it, feeling the weight of it in my palm. My stomach twisted. This was bigger than I imagined. Far bigger. Footsteps. He was coming closer. My breath caught. I needed to act, but panic clawed at my throat. My mind ran through the possibilities. Confrontation, flight, hiding. Nothing seemed enough. Nothing felt safe. He entered the room, calm, methodical. You shouldn't be here, he said. No anger. No surprise. Just that quiet, controlled tone I used to admire. My heart raced. I forced myself to meet his eyes. Why? I asked. My voice was steadier than I felt. Why am I not supposed to see this? He glanced at the papers, the photo in my hand. A flicker of something passed over his face. Guilt? Relief? Neither. He smiled, the kind of smile you see on a man who knows he's untouchable. Because some truths aren't ready to be handled. I didn't respond. My mind was already racing. Ready or not, I was handling this. I was going to dig every secret out, expose every lie. My fingers brushed the flash drive again. That small piece of plastic might be my only weapon. I spent the next hour quietly going through every drawer, every folder, every envelope. Bills and names I didn't recognize. Receipts from places I didn't know he had visited. Hotel stubs, plane tickets, restaurant receipts, all pointing to a life I wasn't allowed to see. My mind reeled. How many lies had he built around me? How many nights had he spent constructing this false version of reality? And then the messages. Emails, hidden on his laptop, flagged in ways he thought I'd never notice. Conversations with women, conversations about money, about plans that excluded me. Every click, every file opened, every line of text revealed a version of him I didn't know existed. A man completely different from the one I loved. Or thought I loved. By 2 a.m., I was exhausted, but the adrenaline wouldn't let me sleep. I sat on the floor surrounded by the wreckage of my own home, staring at the photos and letters. My mind was a storm. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw everything across the room. Part of me wanted to cry, to collapse. But deeper than both was something else, something colder, sharper. Revenge. I knew, in that moment, that nothing would ever be the same. This was not just a betrayal of trust, it was a challenge. a challenge I would meet head-on. And I was going to win. I didn't leave the study until sunrise. By then, I had a plan forming, piece by piece. I would not confront him directly, not yet. I needed leverage. I needed control. And I needed to make sure that every step he took from that moment on would be monitored, tracked, manipulated. I had the drive, the papers, the proof. And soon, I would have the power. But first, I had to survive the night. I set everything back in place as best as I could, but left the flash drive hidden in my jacket pocket. I went to bed, pretending to sleep, listening to the quiet of the house. But sleep didn't come. My mind ran through every scenario, every possible consequence. Every lie he had told me had a trail, and I was going to follow it. No hesitation. No mercy. I didn't know who I would have to become to pull it off. I didn't know how far I'd have to go. All I knew was that from this moment forward, the life I had known was over. My husband, the man I had trusted, the man I had loved, was now my enemy. The sun rose, and with it, the world looked unchanged. Neighbors walked dogs. Birds sang. Cars passed by. But inside me, everything had shifted. The facade of normalcy was broken. Every glance at him from now on would carry suspicion. Every word, every gesture would be scrutinized. I had been blind. Not anymore. And I made a silent promise. I would uncover every secret, expose every lie, and take back everything he had stolen, not just from me, but from the family we built together. As I left the room, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. Be careful. He's already watching. I smiled quietly. Let him watch. Let him think he's in control. He's not. Not anymore. The game had begun. And by the end of it, he wouldn't know who I was or what I was capable of. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. My body felt heavy, but my mind was sharp. I couldn't eat. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was think, plan, move. I grabbed the flash drive and locked myself in the guest bedroom. No one could enter. Not him. Not the kids. The door clicked, and I finally allowed myself to breathe. I plugged the drive into my laptop. Files opened slowly, each one a new shock. Photos, emails, bank statements, hotel reservations. Every file was a thread I could pull to unravel his lies. I printed some of them. I copied others onto a secure backup. This was my arsenal. My weapon. He came down for breakfast, unaware that I had already seen everything. He smiled, casual, making small talk about the day. Military meetings. Deployment schedules. Kids' homework. I nodded, smiled back, all while keeping my mind in overdrive. He had no idea. Not yet. I had to be careful. One wrong move, and everything could explode. But I wasn't going to rush. Patience was key. I needed to understand every connection, every lie, every hidden relationship. By mid-morning, I had mapped out the first steps. I needed information I couldn't get from the house. Bank accounts, phone records, messages. Anything that would prove how deep his deception ran. I would follow the trails he thought were invisible. I left the house under the pretense of errands. Coffee. Grocery shopping. The mundane. But I was watching. Watching patterns. Watching reactions. Every place he had visited, every person he interacted with, I was cataloging it all. I started small, testing his responses. Questions in passing. Casual remarks. His reactions were subtle, but telling. Back home, I began going through his contacts. Names I recognized. Names I didn't. Phone numbers. Addresses. Connections. I realized just how elaborate his double life was. And the deeper I dug, the more dangerous it became. By evening, I had a clear picture. He had been living two lives. The man I knew, the soldier, the father, the husband, was only part of him. There was another side, one I had never met, and it had been operating in secret for years. I felt a surge of anger, but I pushed it down. Anger was dangerous right now. Focus was essential. I needed strategy. I needed control. And I had to make sure he never suspected that I knew. I started documenting everything. A timeline of lies. A record of every interaction I could find. Emails, messages, receipts, photos. I would need proof. Hard proof. And I would use it carefully. Every move had to count. That night, I stayed awake, watching him from the living room. Simple, quiet surveillance. My heart pounded as he moved through the house, completely unaware. Every step he took was a step deeper into the trap I was building. I couldn't believe this was happening. The man I married, trusted, believed in, had hidden an entire world from me. But I wasn't going to break. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to fight. And I was going to win. My plan was taking shape. Slowly. Carefully. Step by step. First, I would gather undeniable proof. Then, I would expose him to the people he thought were loyal. And finally, I would make sure he paid for every lie, every betrayal, every moment of deceit. Sleep finally claimed me for a few hours, but when I woke, the game had already begun. I had made my first move. And from that moment, nothing would ever be the same. I couldn't stay in the guest room forever. The house was a minefield, and I needed space, mobility, control. By the third day, I had memorized his routines, when he left for work, when he returned, who called him, and how he answered. I noticed patterns, small habits that revealed cracks in his carefully constructed life. Every detail was a clue, every slip a potential weapon. I started by checking his emails on the family computer when I knew he'd be out on a run. Hidden folders, encrypted messages, coded addresses. He thought he was clever, but clever doesn't mean invisible. I printed copies, photographed screens with my phone, downloaded attachments. The evidence was piling up. The reality hit me harder with every file. He had spent years building a parallel life. And it wasn't just women. There were financial deals, trips he never mentioned, alliances with people I had never met. I felt the sting of betrayal, but it was mingled with something else, adrenaline. My mind was alive, sharp, calculating. I couldn't let emotion cloud my judgment. That was a luxury I no longer had. Every move now had to be measured. Every word I spoke to him had to be a mask, hiding what I knew and what I planned. Late that night, I followed him to a meeting he hadn't told me about. From a distance, hidden behind a hedge, I watched him greet a man I'd never seen before. The handshake was firm, almost conspiratorial. They whispered, exchanged documents. My stomach nodded. This wasn't just personal betrayal anymore, it was business. Something dangerous. I didn't fully understand it yet, but I knew it mattered. Returning home, I began planning my next moves. I created a detailed map of his contacts, visits, and connections. Every person he had interacted with in secrecy became a node in a web I was determined to unravel. I started setting traps, subtle questions, comments, observations, to see how he would react. And he reacted. He always reacted. I noted every hesitation, every change in tone, every flicker of expression. At home, I couldn't show my intentions. I had to play the part of the oblivious wife. I made breakfast, asked about his day, smiled at the kids. I nodded and laughed when he joked. All while inside, my mind was a machine, running through strategies, possibilities, and contingencies. He had no idea. He was blind. And blind men fall fastest. Days turned into nights, filled with quiet surveillance, document analysis, and careful questioning. I learned more about his habits than anyone else ever would. I discovered passwords, secret accounts, and even coded messages hidden in plain sight. Every revelation was a shock, but it also fueled me. Each secret I uncovered tightened the noose, and I realized how underestimated I had been. Then came the moment I didn't expect. A call from the unknown number. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity outweighed caution. A distorted voice said, "You're moving too fast. He'll know if you make a mistake." I clenched my fists. Mistakes were part of the plan. Missteps could be used. But I wasn't afraid. I was ready. The following day, I confronted a minor discrepancy in his schedule, casually mentioning a meeting he supposedly had. His reaction was subtle but telling: hesitation, a slight flush, a defensive tone. Proof that my intuition had been correct. The house of lies was beginning to crumble. I didn't push further, I waited. Timing was everything. That night, I organized everything I had gathered so far: photos, emails, receipts, contact lists. I created digital copies, hard copies, and backups hidden in places he would never find. My apartment, my car, even the neighbor's mailbox became part of a system designed to protect me and my plan. I started to notice changes in him. Small signs of unease. His movements were sharper, more calculated. He began checking his phone more frequently, double-checking appointments. He didn't know why, but he sensed something. That gave me a thrill unlike anything I had felt before. The hunter was becoming aware of the hunt. By the end of the week, I had a full picture of the scope of his deception. It was bigger than I could have imagined, and it wasn't just emotional betrayal, it was manipulation, financial secrecy, and strategic lies. Every piece of information I had collected became a thread, and I knew that pulling one carefully would unravel everything. I sat in the guest room that night, staring at my notes, my printed emails, the photos spread across the floor. The pieces were all there. It was all ready. All I needed now was precision. Every next move had to be perfect. One wrong step, one careless action, and years of planning could collapse. And then I realized the truth. I wasn't just seeking revenge anymore. I was reclaiming control. Every lie he told, every secret he kept, every time he thought he was untouchable, he underestimated me. And that was his first, fatal mistake. The plan was no longer just about exposing him. It was about dismantling the entire life he had built on lies, piece by piece, and making sure he would feel every consequence. Not out of cruelty, though he deserved that, but to restore what he had destroyed, the trust, the family, the life we had built together. I knew there would be obstacles. There would be moments when fear would creep in, when doubt would gnaw at me. But I was ready. I had to be. Because once this started, there was no turning back. And the deeper I went, the more I realized something terrifying. He wasn't just a man hiding lies. He was clever, manipulative, and dangerous. He had survived battles, schemes, and secrets that could ruin anyone. But I had something he never expected. Knowledge, determination, and a drive that wouldn't allow failure. The game had changed. From now on, I wasn't just reacting, I was initiating. Every move he made would be anticipated, every lie cataloged, every mistake recorded. The battlefield was set. And he had no idea. By the time he returned home that night, I was waiting. Calm. Collected. Watching. Smiling even. I asked him about his day. He hesitated. I noticed. The first crack. And I smiled, quietly, knowing it was only the beginning. I had discovered the first layer of his life. The deeper layers, the dangerous truths, the full extent of his betrayal, that would come next. And I would be ready. Because I was no longer the woman who woke up to a crash in the garage. I was the woman who was about to dismantle everything he thought he controlled. I waited for the perfect moment. Every plan I had drafted, every piece of evidence I collected, led to this. I wasn't going to rush. Patience was my ally, and timing was everything. One wrong move and he could disappear, destroy evidence, or worse, turn the tables on me. The next day, I started small. I intercepted a routine delivery he didn't tell me about. The courier handed me a package meant for him. I pretended to be curious, glanced at the contents, documents, receipts, more proof of his hidden life. I made mental notes, photographed each page. This was just the beginning. I moved quietly through my home, adjusting cameras I had installed discreetly weeks earlier. Nothing too obvious, he didn't suspect. But I was learning more about his patterns, his habits, and his vulnerabilities with every passing hour. Each tiny detail became a weapon. Each slip a potential breakthrough. By evening, I had constructed a small dossier, a mini-map of his secrets, relationships, and routines. I started testing boundaries, subtle questions over dinner, casual remarks about things he should never have revealed. He responded instinctively, hesitation barely noticeable, but enough. Every micro-reaction I observed fed into my strategy. Then I made my first bold move. I left a small, anonymous note in his car. Just a line, "I know more than you think. Watch your steps." I didn't know if he would read it. I didn't care. The point was to unsettle him, to let him know the game had begun. The next day, I watched him carefully. He was distracted, unusually cautious. I noted every glance, every pause, every phone check. The man who once walked through the world with military precision was suddenly uncertain. He didn't know why, but he sensed the change. That uncertainty was mine. I controlled it. I began digging deeper into his financial life. Hidden accounts, unexplained transfers, credit lines he thought I'd never find. I connected the dots, traced patterns, and found anomalies. I started documenting everything meticulously, chronologies, spreadsheets, notes. It was cold, clinical work, but necessary. Emotional detachment was crucial. This was war, and I was the strategist. I tested him further. Small traps, simple statements meant to provoke subtle reactions. And he reacted every time. A flinch here, a pause there, a tone shift he couldn't mask. Each reaction confirmed my suspicions. He was human, vulnerable. And for the first time in years, I felt power. The night fell, and with it, a quiet that was almost deafening. I sat in the living room, watching him from a distance, pretending to read, while actually observing. He moved with caution now, his usual ease replaced by an unconscious alertness. I noted the changes. Every shift in behavior was data, every twitch a clue. Then came a moment I hadn't fully anticipated. He checked his phone repeatedly, whispering into it. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I observed the tension. He was clearly communicating something he hadn't before. I jotted down times, patterns, gestures. Whatever it was important. And I would find out what. I realized something chilling. He was more dangerous than I had imagined. Not reckless, not careless. Clever, calculating, strategic. The kind of mind that had survived war zones, deception, and manipulation. But I wasn't afraid. I was ready. I had built my arsenal, mapped his patterns, and now I had his reactions. Over the next few days, I escalated my tactics. I left small hints, planted questions, monitored his contacts. I traced his movements, his meetings, his secret communications. Every layer of deception he had built was slowly unraveling, and he didn't know it yet. Then came a breakthrough. A text, an accidental misstep, a message sent to the wrong person. It was a crack in his fortress. I grabbed it immediately, printed it, archived it, and integrated it into my growing dossier. Each discovery made the plan clearer, sharper, more actionable. I was no longer simply reacting. I was controlling, guiding him, shaping his perceptions, leading him into situations where he would reveal more without realizing it. I was in command, and every day, the man I had once trusted more than anyone was slowly showing the first signs of fear. By the end of the week, I had everything I needed for the first phase of my plan. Proof of deception. Records of betrayal. Evidence of manipulation. And, most importantly, control over the narrative. I could strike anytime, and he would be defenseless, exposed. I looked at him across the room one evening, smiling at the kids, oblivious. My mind calculated every possible reaction, every escape route, every lie he might tell. And I knew he had no idea what was coming. Not even close. The game had moved from observation to action. And I was ready to pull the first strings. I had built my arsenal. Now it was time to fire the first real shots. I didn't want blood. I wanted ruin. Quiet, irreparable ruin that ate at everything he valued: status, security, respect. I knew his world: military honors, neighbors who admired him, friends who trusted him, and I knew exactly which pieces to remove first. Phase 1: Reputation. I crafted a simple anonymous packet and mailed it to his commanding officer. No threats. No drama. Just facts, dates, photos, receipts, hotel names, and copies of messages that proved not just infidelity, but questionable conduct that could jeopardize his position. I attached a brief note: "You should know." I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. The reaction came faster than I expected. Within 3 days, there was a brass-level inquiry request in his inbox. He tried to laugh it off at home. He put on the soldier face I used to find so attractive. Prideful, controlled. But I watched closely as his hands shook while he poured his coffee. The first seed of panic had taken root. Phase 2: Finances. I'd traced transfers to an offshore account. I presented the documents to a lawyer I'd quietly consulted under a fake name. I didn't want him to think this was about money for me. I wanted it to look like concerned third parties were already circling. The lawyer called me back with options: freeze requests, subpoenas, audits. Legal language that sounded like thunder in his world. I didn't call the bank. I didn't need to. I let the paper trail, and the right anonymous tip set the wheels in motion. A compliance officer started asking questions. He had to explain certain transfers. He began to sweat in public. That was the sound I lived for, the audible shift from control to discomfort. Phase 3. Social isolation. I reached out to a few women in our neighborhood, the PTA president, an old friend of mine who still kept in touch with his military circle, a woman he'd confided in years ago. I didn't accuse. I told my story coldly, carefully. I gave them evidence to read. I let their faces do the rest. People started looking at him differently at weekend barbecues. Invitations dried up. Casual hellos became tight lips and polite avoidance. He mistook it for paranoia at first. Then for fallout he couldn't manage. At night, he tried to corner me. "What are you doing?" he demanded once, voice low, "the children asleep upstairs." "Who are you talking to?" I looked at him. Calm. Focused. "You should be asking who you've been dealing with," I said. "Not who I'm talking to." He slammed his fist into a drawer and stormed out. The show of anger was predictable. He believed force could sweep the mess away. He was wrong. While he fought panic, I worked methodically. I fed small, controlled leaks to his business partner, a man who kept his own secrets and who hated being lied to. I sent a copy of a hotel receipt with a partial name visible. I left voicemails from a burner number that suggested a different timeline than the one he'd given his partner. The partners started to ask questions. Suspicion spread. Deals stalled. Licensing discussions were put on hold. Money that had been flowing suddenly slowed. I watched their relationship crack, and I felt the noose tighten another notch. I also sabotaged his comfort zones. I placed evidence, carefully chosen, where it would be discovered by people he wanted to impress. At a community fundraiser, I slipped a printout into the program folder of an event he'd planned. The folder made its way into the hands of someone who kept impeccable notes, a woman I'd once seen volunteering beside him. She called me the next day, voice trembling, and asked if I had any idea what was going on. I said nothing. I let her think. I let her look. He lashed out. In front of the kids. In those moments, I kept my face blank. I recorded a few of his outbursts on my phone, not to post, not to humiliate, but to document. If the military asked for patterns of behavior, I'd have them. If a custody battle ever rose, I'd have evidence. Everything I collected was purpose-built. The more pressure I applied, the more reckless he became. He started staying late at the base, claiming extra duty. He missed family dinners he once planned. He tripped over lies, left receipts in his car, sent messages to the wrong numbers. Small human errors that grow into avalanches. I kept everything. Backups on hard drives, encrypted cloud storage, dozens of printed copies hidden in places he'd never think to check. I learned to compartmentalize like he did. Secrets require maps. I drew them and memorized every route. One night, my anonymous contacts paid off in a way I hadn't predicted. A local reporter called. Someone in the community office had forwarded them a packet. I didn't plan to go public yet, but the reporter's voice was practical and hungry. "We've been hearing rumors," he said. "We'd like to verify." I lied, told him I was just an observer, not involved. I fed him a few small, verifiable facts and watched him file the piece. I kept it measured. No screams. No sensationalism. Just facts. He published a short, neutral story, questions about a respected service member and pending inquiries. I saw the ripple instantly. When the story ran, neighbors called. Old friends texted. He tried to call his commanding officer to smooth things, but the officer's tone was clipped. Protocol had to run its course. He was being restrained, not arrested, not yet, but the restraint felt like a cuff. At home, the silence changed. It wasn't the same polite quiet as before. It was the heavy quiet of a house waiting for an explosion. The kids were confused. I gave them simple, safe answers. Dad has some work to do. I lied to protect them and to keep the story focused. I was not a monster. I was strategic. I started to press where it hurt most. I accessed a dormant email account I'd found months ago, one he used to coordinate side trips. I used a password reset through a service he'd listed on a form. It was risky, yes, but I did not break laws. I reset access through legitimate channels and used the information he'd given. I opened the account and found correspondence that tied him to a contractor known for bribery and favors. That alone would not convict him, but it would prompt investigations and freeze reputations. I sent what I found to the right people and watched the ripple. He began to change physically. He lost weight. He stopped shaving as regularly. He started snapping at the kids over minor things. Once, he threatened to leave. I let him edge toward the door. Let him think that was his escape plan. I still held all the cards. Every move I made had to be defensible. Every leak had to be traceable only to anonymous sources. I never touched accounts directly. I never forged signatures. I didn't need to. Secrets reveal themselves with a shove. I shoved. Then came a turning point. He called a meeting with his partner to clear the air. I knew the partner would ask for proof. I left a USB in his briefcase that contained a folder labeled evidence. It had curated items, innocuous at first glance, damning when assembled. He opened it at the meeting. I couldn't be there, but I watched the fallout. There were raised voices. A slammed door. The partner's face moved through confusion to disgust. I smiled. By now, the base was asking questions. The partner was wary. The community was talking. Financial freezes were in motion. The world he'd built began to crumble from the outside in. And inside the house, tension grew into something raw. But my plan wasn't to destroy him fully yet. I wanted him exposed, vulnerable, stripped of the shields he'd relied on. Only when he was truly isolated would the final moves have maximum effect. I needed him to be cornered, to make mistakes, to panic publicly. I'd made him look reckless. I'd rattled his partners. I'd nudged the base to look under documents. I'd turned friends into distant acquaintances. Next came the hardest step, turning the children's world into a shield for the truth. That would require finesse. That would require patience. And I had both. At night, when the house finally sank into sleep, I sat alone at my kitchen table and laid out everything I'd accomplished. The dossier had grown into a thick stack. It did not feel like triumph. It felt like responsibility. I had chosen a path. There were consequences for all of us. But I would not step away. The war he'd started with his lies was becoming a war he could not win. And every day, in small, careful ways, I made sure of it. He fought back when he realized the net was closing. Not with confession. With counterattack. The first sign was a lawyer's letter slipped beneath the front door. Heavy envelope, stamped official. It accused me of harassment and unauthorized access. It demanded I stop contacting his colleagues, cease spreading rumors, and return any materials I'd taken. The tone tried to be calm. The words were a threat. I read it once. Folded it neatly. Then I made 3 copies. One went into the dossier, one into a safety box at a neighbor's, and one into a locked drawer in my car. Redundancy had become my religion. He tried the personal route next. Anger, then pleading. "We can fix this," he said one night, voice low, the kids asleep upstairs. "We can go to counseling." "We can," he trailed off. I could smell the fear now, a sharp, metallic tang. I answered the way I had to. "No," I said. "Not this time." My voice was steady. My plan was in motion. His next move was predictable. He went for control of the narrative. He called his old friends, his commanders, even the families we'd socialized with for years. He painted a version of events where I was unstable, obsessive, unreasonable. He whispered doubts into ears that had trusted him for decades. It should have worked. For a moment, I saw some old allies hesitate. Then I remembered the packets I'd mailed, the evidence I'd placed where it would be seen. Evidence speaks louder than whispers. He also tried to manipulate the kids. He started late-night talks, gentle and rehearsed, asking them to remember things differently. "Mom's been stressed," he told them. "She's been making accusations." He tried to make the children doubt what they'd seen and heard. I watched him through the baby monitor sometimes, silent and furious. I recorded one of his conversations with our son, careful not to break privacy laws, and saved it. Patterns mattered. Proof mattered. When subtlety failed, he escalated. He accused me of taking money. A small withdrawal I'd made from our joint account, money I'd used to pay for the lawyer under a false name, suddenly became my crime. He posted a thinly veiled social media message about betrayal and theft. Neighbors who'd once invited us to weekend barbecues started to whisper. The pressure mounted. I expected this. I had built contingencies. I had an attorney ready, a friend who ran a small private investigations firm, and a safe room's worth of digital and physical backups hidden in places he would never think to check. I moved faster than he could. I countered every claim with documentation. Bank printouts. Timestamped video. Witness statements. I kept my tone measured. No hysteria. No overreach. The court would like that. The public would too. Then he did something dangerous. He tried to take the kids. Not physically at first, but legally. He filed for emergency custody on the grounds that my behavior made the household unstable. He painted me as unpredictable, implied that my digging into his life crossed lines. The papers arrived at dawn, a cold slap to the face. I didn't panic. I called my attorney. We moved in minutes. Protection orders were considered and rejected as unnecessary by counsel. Counterclaims were more strategic. Instead, we compiled every recorded instance of his volatility, every missed school event, every deceit. The same dossier that had toppled his reputation now became our shield. I started preparing for court. Depositions, affidavits, lists of witnesses. I put together a timeline with dates, times, receipts, and evidence that directly contradicted his claims. I worked through the nights. The kids needed stability. They needed routine. I gave them that. No drama at breakfast. No whispered arguments. Just pancakes and cartoons, normal on the surface, planning beneath. Public pressure began to mount too. The small article that had run grew into questions, then into a local news segment. He lashed out at the camera, defensive, angry, and the video only made him look more unstable. The base issued a formal statement that they were investigating. That line calmed public opinion but increased internal scrutiny. He went on leave. He needed to be seen as compliant. But compliance does not erase damage. He became desperate. Desperation makes people dangerous. One night, I found evidence on his laptop that didn't fit the pattern. An email thread with a small-time fixer, a man known for cutting through problems in ways that skirts legality. Payments. Trip itineraries. A plan to quietly relocate certain items, legal documents, and possibly witnesses. The words on the screen were deliberate and cold. I watched him more closely after that. He stayed out late. He stopped answering direct questions. I began to suspect he might try to flee with the children. The thought alone made my hands shake, but I did not let it show. I prepared countermeasures. Copies of birth certificates and school records were tucked into my neighbor's safe. Passports? Checked. Flights? Monitored. I set discreet alerts on his credit cards and flagged his frequent flyer account. If he moved funds, I wanted to see where they went. I also played a dangerous game of my own. I fed a controlled leak to a member of his inner circle, someone who still trusted him. I hinted at new information, documents that would ruin him if they reached the right hands. I watched the circle contract. The man I'd tipped off called me late, voice shaky. "You're pushing too hard," he said. "He'll come after you." I thanked him and hung up. People who betray their own often make mistakes when defending him. That's when you strike. The legal maneuvering intensified. Subpoenas flew both ways. My phone was tapped, I suspected, not by me, but by the law firm or by him. I used burner phones for sensitive calls. I met my PI at a public cafe, swapped hard drives under napkins. Old habits from a different life made me precise. I compartmentalized. I moved in circles that didn't overlap. Then the night came when he confronted me in the kitchen. He was red-faced, voice low and dangerous. "If you push me," he said, "I will make sure you lose everything. I will make sure no one believes you." I stared at him. "Calm. Try," I said. The word was small. Cold. It landed like a stone. He slammed his fist against the counter. Dishes rattled. Our daughter stirred in her sleep above. He stormed out. I heard the car engine roar to life moments later. My heart pounded. I called a friend to watch the house. My hands hovered over the phone. I wanted to follow him, to see where he'd go. I didn't. I let him go. 2 hours later, when the clock read past midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "He knows more. He's planning to run. Be ready." The timing was deliberate. The final push had begun. I opened the folder I'd kept locked in the car. The dossier stared back at me like a living thing. Photos, receipts, hotel stubs, emails. Evidence of a life built on hidden transactions and worse. Documents that could ruin him. Documents that could protect me. I set the laptop to upload encrypted backups to 3 different cloud accounts. I sent a copy to my attorney, to a trusted friend out of state, and to a secure Dropbox monitored by a journalist who'd promised to hold file copies until they were needed in court. Distribution was insurance. I didn't sleep. I replayed the confrontation in my head. Every phrase. Every look. I knew one thing for certain: he would not go quietly. He had too much to lose. And when a man with secrets thinks the rope is tightening, he either fights, flees, or breaks. I checked the kids' rooms again. Sleep caught them as if nothing had happened. I kissed their foreheads, soft, and whispered promises of normalcy. On the outside, I gave them warmth and pancakes. On the inside, I braced for the storm. Before dawn, I packed an overnight bag. Clothes, comfort items for the kids, documents. Not because I intended to run. Because we might need to. Because when you play war with a man who can order soldiers at a moment's notice, every contingency must be ready. The sun rose with the same indifferent light as always. I watched it through the kitchen window and felt the calm before the strike. The house hummed. The engine of a car started outside. I knew whose it was before I saw it. He pulled up the driveway and sat in the car for a long time. I did not go out to meet him. I watched from the blinds, heart steady, dossier beside me, phone at hand. He stared into the house like a man trying to read a code he no longer understood. Then he reached for the phone. He dialed. His voice was low and urgent. I couldn't hear the other end, but I could see his hand tremble on the steering wheel. A moment later, police lights flashed down the block. 2 cruisers turned into our street. My heart dropped into my stomach. The next move had arrived. The next confrontation was coming. The wind that once carried the smell of fresh bread and coffee from the nearby cafe now reeked of dust, ash, and betrayal. The house I had grown up in stood before me like a silent witness. Blackened windows, a warped roof, echoes of voices long silenced. I pressed my son against my chest, feeling his warm, restless breathing. He was only 3, but he had already learned to watch the world in silence, as if he saw more than a child should. Images flashed through my mind like a slideshow. My sister in a white dress, a bride that should have been me. His eyes, the same eyes that had once promised loyalty. Back then, I had stood aside, heart shattering like glass. Now I stood here, heart hardened to stone. In my arms was more than my son, my fate rested there too. I had learned to live without regret, to breathe in the rhythm of revenge. Nothing forges a woman stronger than the betrayal of those she loved most. The sun pierced through heavy clouds like a knife through soft fabric. I stepped forward, toward the yard where I had once run barefoot as a little girl. The walls that had once displayed childhood drawings were now scorched, like scars on skin. My fingers brushed against the rough brick, leaving invisible traces. My son whimpered. I bent down and kissed the top of his head. Shut, little one. Just a little longer. We're strong. We'll make it, I whispered. A single tear ran down my cheek. The last one. From now on, only cold resolve. When he left, taking with him the emptiness where affection once lived, I thought my world had ended. But it hadn't. It had strengthened, hardened like steel. I had lost my home, my family, my trust, but not myself. I stood now, child in arms, before the charred walls, as if facing an arena. "You thought you took everything from me," I whispered, staring into the black window. "But you left me the one thing that matters, time. And time does its work." Images raced in my mind, secret meetings with lawyers, whispered conversations in dark hallways, plans weaving together like a spider's web. I was no longer a victim. I had become the hunter. And tonight, my first step back into this world began. My heart pounded in a steady rhythm, each beat a promise. Every step was a bullet aimed true. The sun finally broke through the clouds, casting light across my face. Light fell on my dark hair, on eyes burning, not with tears, but with resolve. Down the street, a black car had stopped. The windows were tinted, but I knew who sat inside. They were watching. They always were. I adjusted the blanket over my son's shoulders. "It's time to take back what's ours, little one," I whispered. "It's time to take it all." My fingers gripped him tightly. I didn't tremble, not from fear, not from cold. Because inside, a fire burned, and nothing could extinguish it. The wind rose, carrying ash from the burned garage into the yard, swirling like a black curtain. I stepped forward into the ashes of my past, ready to build my future. Now, everything would change. The moment had come to strike, not with rage, but with precision. I had been waiting, watching, calculating. Every weakness, every secret, every slip of his carefully constructed life was catalogued, mapped, and ready. Now it was time to act. I started small. A phone call here, a subtle tip there. Nothing that could be traced back to me. I fed information to the right people, the people he trusted most, who would unconsciously pass it along, creating ripples of doubt. I didn't need to confront him directly. I needed him to feel the walls closing in without ever seeing the hands behind it. First, the professional front. I sent an anonymous packet to his commanding officer. Dates, messages, hotel receipts, evidence of deceit, of hidden arrangements that could jeopardize his position. No threats. Just facts. A simple note: you should know. Within days, inquiries began. He tried to brush it off at home, with that soldier's face he always wore, calm, composed, untouchable. But I saw the tremor in his hands when he poured his coffee, the quick glance over his shoulder as if the shadows themselves were whispering secrets. The first seeds of panic had taken root. Next, finances. I'd traced transfers to an offshore account he thought I'd never find. Using a lawyer under a fake identity, I triggered audits, compliance checks, and subpoenas. I didn't touch a single account directly. I let the paper trail do the work. Every call, every request, every freeze on funds left him one step closer to exposure. I watched him calculate, stress mounting in the lines of his face. He had been the master of strategy, but now someone else controlled the board. Then came isolation. Friends, neighbors, colleagues, they all began to notice inconsistencies. I reached out, quietly, supplying just enough to seed doubt. I didn't accuse. I presented facts. Their reactions did the rest. Invitations to gatherings dwindled. Polite hellos turned to nods, cautious distances. He misread it at first, thought it paranoia, but the whispers grew louder, feeding off his own guilt. At home, I remained calm. The children noticed nothing. I gave them normalcy: breakfasts, bedtime stories, laughter. But beneath that surface, I built defenses, gathered proof, and set traps. Microphones, cameras, digital backups, all discreet, all legal, all ready to catch his next move. He tried to regain control, of course. A confrontation here, a pleading voice there. "We can fix this," he said one night, voice low, children asleep upstairs. But I stood firm. "Not this time," I said. Calm. Precise. Every word a blade. When subtlety failed, he lashed out publicly. Social media posts, whispered accusations, thinly veiled threats. But I anticipated each move. My dossier was ready: receipts, emails, photographs, logs, recordings. For every lie he told, I had proof. For every twist, a counter. The more desperate he became, the more mistakes he made. Then he escalated further, filing for emergency custody. His claims were exaggerated, manipulative, a dangerous mix of truth and distortion. The papers arrived like a hammer blow. I didn't flinch. I had contingency plans, an attorney on standby, a private investigator, and digital and physical backups of everything he could use against me. Protection and strategy were ready. I monitored him constantly. Late-night phone calls, unaccounted for trips, secretive messages. I tracked them all. He became reckless, paranoid. And that recklessness was my advantage. I leaked small pieces of information to his inner circle, hints that made them question his judgment. Friends and colleagues began second-guessing him, subtly, unknowingly. His network started to fracture. The tipping point came unexpectedly. One evening, I accessed a dormant email account tied to hidden arrangements. The messages detailed payments, itineraries, plans to relocate documents, and possibly manipulate witnesses. Cold, calculated, dangerous. I saved everything. I didn't act immediately. I didn't need to. The knowledge alone gave me leverage. From that point, everything escalated. Subpoenas, inquiries, whispers in the community. The article I had subtly fed to a journalist now snowballed into a local story, questions about a respected service member, pending investigations. He tried to respond, defensively, angrily, but each reaction only exposed more. Every step he took left a trail, and I had the map. At home, tension was thick. The house no longer felt safe for him. He snapped at the children over trivialities, tried to corner me with desperate questions. Every outburst was recorded, every misstep documented. I stayed calm, unshaken. I was no longer reacting, I was orchestrating. Then the night came when he confronted me directly. Red-faced, hands trembling. "If you push me," he said, voice low and dangerous, "I will make sure you lose everything. No one will believe you." I stared. "Calm. Try," I said. 2 words. Cold. Heavy. They landed like bullets. He stormed out. The car engine roared to life. My heart raced, but I didn't follow. I had prepared for this. Contingency plans, backups, hidden evidence, the children's safety, all accounted for. I let him leave. Minutes later, my phone buzzed with an anonymous text. "He knows more. He's planning to run. Be ready." Timing was deliberate. The final moves had begun. I opened my locked folder, dossier staring back like a living entity. Photos, messages, receipts, proof of his lies, manipulation, and hidden life. Digital backups uploaded to secure clouds, copies sent to my attorney and trusted friends. Distribution was insurance. I checked the children. Sleeping. Safe. Outside, the sun rose as if indifferent to the storm about to hit. A car pulled up the driveway. He sat inside, eyes scanning the house, trying to decode what he couldn't yet see. I didn't move. I watched. His hands trembled on the steering wheel. The next confrontation, the true reckoning, was about to begin. And I was ready. The morning was still. Too still. The kind of quiet that presses on your chest, the world holding its breath before a storm. I had prepared for this moment for months, every move mapped, every contingency planned. Nothing would catch me off guard. He came in first, quietly, almost cautiously, but the moment our eyes met, the pretense of control cracked. He looked around the house as if expecting an ambush, a trap at every corner. He saw nothing. The living room was normal. The kids' toys were scattered. Breakfast dishes left in a casual mess. The calm before the storm. "You can't keep doing this," he said, voice low, trying to reclaim authority. "You're destroying everything. We can fix this." "No," I cut him off, my voice steady. "Not this time. It ends today." He froze. For the first time in years, I saw uncertainty in his eyes. That's when I struck, not with violence, but with the undeniable truth. I handed him the folder. Thick, heavy, filled with every shred of proof he had buried, every secret he thought was hidden. The dossier he had underestimated. He opened it, flipping through the pages. His hands shook, and I could see the panic rising behind his carefully maintained mask. Emails, receipts, hotel stubs, correspondence with people he shouldn't have trusted, everything was there. Every lie, every manipulation, every betrayal laid bare. This "This isn't real," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "It is real," I said. "And now everyone who matters will see it too. Friends, colleagues, the base, even the children's teachers. Nothing you do can erase this." His face went pale. He dropped the folder. Papers scattered across the floor like fallen soldiers. I watched him struggle to gather them, but the damage was done. The truth was in motion, unstoppable, and I was the conductor. "You think you can humiliate me," he said, voice rising. "You think you can ruin my life." I stepped closer, my gaze unwavering. "I didn't ruin your life. You did. You chose this. You chose betrayal, lies, manipulation. I simply made sure the world knows it too." The first knock came at the door. Then another. Police. The local investigator I had discreetly tipped. They had arrived with a warrant to seize evidence, verify claims, and interview witnesses. His mouth opened. Words failed him. Panic surged. I kept my calm as I had for months. The children were upstairs, unaware, safe. My heart thudded in my chest, but I did not tremble. This was the moment of truth. He tried to plead, tried to argue, tried to bargain. Each word fell flat. Each lie was exposed by the documents in my hands. Every attempt to manipulate was countered by proof, by witness statements, by patterns he could not deny. He looked around, realizing the network of friends and colleagues he had once relied on was no longer loyal. Everyone who had once believed him now questioned, doubted, and withdrew. The web of influence he had spun collapsed piece by piece, thread by thread. I finally let him see the emails with the contractor, the financial missteps, the lies to his partner, the patterns of deceit. His breathing became shallow, rapid. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He realized that nothing could save him, not his rank, not his charm, not his threats. The investigators collected the evidence. I stood to the side, silent. No triumph. Only focus. The children remained untouched by the chaos. The calm, methodical destruction of his empire had been carried out without them ever knowing the danger. When the officers left, he remained, seated, pale, broken. He stared at me. For the first time, fear replaced arrogance. Regret replaced denial. The man who had once controlled everything now had nothing. I walked past him, taking my son's hand. Outside, sunlight finally broke fully through the clouds. The air felt clean, charged, electric. Freedom had a taste of ash and cold steel, but it was ours. "You wanted control," I said softly to him. "You tried to bend everyone to your will. But control is a myth. Power is fragile. And lies always come to light." I led my son to the car. The neighborhood, the street, the town, it would whisper for weeks about what had happened here. But I didn't care. I had done what was necessary. Justice was quiet. Justice was precise. I looked back once. He remained seated, alone among the wreckage of his own making. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I only felt the hard satisfaction of survival and of victory. As we drove away, I thought of the months of planning, the nights spent awake, the fear and anticipation, the meticulous execution. Every step had been worth it. And those scars remained, though the echoes of betrayal lingered. We were finally safe. And in that moment, I understood, revenge is not just about punishment. It's about reclaiming life, reclaiming dignity, reclaiming the future. And ours, mine and my son's, was just beginning. The storm had passed, but the fire remained. And it would guide us through everything that came next.